which is the Global Sustainability Lead Africa at SAP Africa. So he will give us just a bit more about what are the future perfect skills for employability and entrepreneurship. Mr. Sunil, welcome and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's a privilege to join you this morning. I'm in Johannesburg today, and it's been a cloudy day so far. Traffic has been great moving around from this morning. So I hope you've had a good session thus far. Maybe to start off and to sort of frame the current challenge that we have. I think the COVID pandemic has demonstrated that citizens, individuals, non-profits, street vendors, hawkers, people are in the informal trade, the formal trade itself, governments, multilateral agencies like the African Union, the European Commission, United Nations, etc., that there's been an increased expectation of the use of digital technology or technology per se to fulfill what was previously considered the norm in terms of engaging not only with government, but more particularly with the private sector. And if one looks at how we will move, we're still in a pandemic, but let's assume we could get to a point where we talk about life in a post-pandemic era. What is it that will be required for countries, citizens themselves, cities, to actually be globally competitive? And then when one starts looking into that, the reality is stark. For example, across the globe, what we're finding is that most of the countries that have invested heavily in technology-related skills and development thereof, they are able to deal with matters and ensure that transactional capacity that takes place between the citizens, government itself, the NGOs, and the general populace actually happens at a much easier rate with the use of technology. Then begs an important question. I think if you just look at us today and where we're sitting, and we take simple things, and I'll delve deeper into some of the technologies, etc. But I'll keep it at a level which is not highly technical and not talking about bits and bytes and the way data moves and what happens in the background. But maybe to reflect a bit about ourselves. If you were told that you're going to come to a leadership event that was virtual 3 years ago, you'll scoff at it and say, listen, don't kid me, because I actually need the ability to engage with people, the conviviality to be felt. But today, everybody is a so-called Zoomer. Zoom stocks rose heavily during this period. And if one looks across the board at technology companies from the United States moving across to Europe and Asia Pacific and Japan, there's been a fairly fertile opportunity for these companies to actually thrive in these times because of the acceleration of the need of technology during this COVID pandemic that we've experienced. Then the question then further begs and answers, what can we as South Africa, and I'll put Africa in brackets, actually do to remain globally competitive? Now, there's a whole range of things. One can start by throwing rocks at the system, but that actually achieves nothing. I believe that there needs to be criticisms leveled at certain areas where we haven't done well as a country, as a continent. But it doesn't help to do that on the one hand and do nothing to accelerate the process of technology skills development and advancement. And I thought today I should share with you a few experiences, that I've had in this place. And I'll take it back as far as 10 years ago, and to give you some context around that. Now, when it wasn't fashionable, when robotics wasn't a thing and artificial intelligence wasn't such a huge thing, SAP engaged quite interestingly with a number of institutions, both at the university level, then FETs were not in place, but sort of colleges, and looking at schools. And sort of in 2010, what we decided to do is at a very early stage, support this first Lego League. Now, many people think, oh, it's Lego, it's just some kids building some blocks together. And I want to tell a little story because the anecdotal information is as important as the factual and empirical stuff that comes out of it. And so from around 2010, we began to support this first Lego League program in South Africa. And of course, it's moved across to Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and other states on the continent. And essentially, the program is about engaging young people in a playful mechanism so that they learn by doing rather than feeling that they're in an environment and pressurized to actually learn about skill sets, particularly coding itself. And these young kids were given the ability, they were judged on sort of 4 levels, which included some research on a topic. And therein, we need to reflect when you look at a program like the first Lego League as to what is happening in our educational system in the country currently. Where are we in terms of being benchmarked against the best? We know that we are not the best performers in math, science in the world. We rank at the bottom. And that is something, I suppose, when I look at almost 12 years ago when we engaged with this first Lego League, being someone who's very passionate about science and math education, we took it as an opportunity to engage children, particularly in rural areas and peri-urban areas of disadvantaged backgrounds, to get involved with this process. And what's coming out of that, which research has shown, and I'll share that with the organizers of the conference, is that kids who've embarked in programs like the first Lego League program, where they're actually building something and programming a robot to do certain tasks, there's a very high correlation between their participation, even if it's at a very rudimentary level, to them taking up subjects, one, and skill sets that are technologically related. So there's independent studies done on this to show this. Now, what is the point of this particular discussion is that in our country, we need to create more opportunities and platforms like for the likes of the first Lego League to encourage, because if you're sitting at home now and you're looking back at maybe 4 or 5 decades that you spent on this planet, we need to assist you to be functional in this environment. But those generations that have spent 10 and 15 years on this planet are the ones we really need to make this investment and to ensure that there's an input of human capital. So that's a little bit on just creating the future, I would call it. And I bring it back, and obviously I am biased towards enabling skill sets to be developed in the technological sphere because that is the future. Now, if we advance that conversation from that artificial intelligence to what is happening today, there's medical journals that are being developed and currently in circulation, which have been peer reviewed, which shows that as time goes, more and more of us may have substitute organs. So the cyborg that you saw in Terminator movies, Terminator 1, 2, those of us giving our ages away with these movies, those cyborgs are already around us. There are people around us who are benefiting out of artificial intelligence. And then that speaks to the longevity of the human, life, your lifespan per se. And with more and more of this happening, there are more jobs that are being created across the globe, which are linked to technology and which has a substantial impact on the longevity of humans. But in particular, it also has an impact on the GDPs, the well-being of people, the GDP per capita that's being driven in those societies. And the naysayers will say things like, oh, but we'll be losing jobs. That will happen. But the only thing we can be assured of in life is change. If we look historically, and this joke of 4IR and the parliamentary process, and when a politician was questioned about that. But these revolutions that took place, and you remember the Industrial Revolution, when that took place, the mechanization that happened during that time. People are also saying jobs will be lost. We won't be able to increase the global population. There may be challenges that will exist that we'll never be able to fix up into the future. But the Industrial Revolution has taken us into mechanization, which has taken us into better production. across the board, from crops, from products that are used on a daily basis. So I would say that it's critical that we continue to invest in the development of skill sets in the technological arena. I'm going to leave you with two, because I know my time is short and I've been given a really short space of time. I want to touch on two other things. Another program that I'd like to talk about in the evolution of skill sets of Africans and young Africans between the age of 8 and 16. So together with Scratch, or I would say with MIT, you should be familiar with MIT. It's an institution based in Massachusetts, which is the leading institution in technology. They created this free software called Scratch, and SAP, together with partners, has been driving this Africa Code Week program, which has been running, since 2016, and it's been running completely funded and working across the length and breadth of the continent. We've touched the lives of more than 12 million young children in that process. And I can tell you one thing and why we need to do it. And I'm going to leave you with this sort of anecdote and then a sub point to finish off. I think it may have been 2017. Yeah, probably 2017. The World Economic Forum was hosted in Rwanda. And I recall we went up to this mountain, and I took with me a group of people with some computers, which were mobile. We had with us a famous South African group called Mikasa. The entire group was with us. We went up a mountainside, and I can tell you, I was out of breath climbing for about 30 minutes. We got there, and here were children who have never seen a laptop in their lives, let alone a phone, let alone, a radio for that matter. And what we put these kids together, and within 45 minutes, we had these kids coding. 15 minutes later, they were creating games. And where am I heading with this conversation? The future is our youth, particularly young women, because there's an increasing correlation between empowering women, their ability to drive GDP extension, and to take care of their families. And lastly, I want to touch on another program that is doing some tremendous work across the length and breadth of South Africa, and these are our Siafunda Community Technology Centers. We started off with that in 2006, and today we have more than 200 centers across the length and breadth of the country. We even have a center in the Karoo, where the array system is being set up for the telescopic, for the largest telescope, or we call it in the globe. And what's coming out of that is we're seeing that Gokos or older generation women who come to these centers, they're learning skill sets, basic things to you and I mean, sending an email or building a CV or being able to engage on social media, and more importantly, to get certified on the likes of Microsoft skill sets or SAP Light Solutions or Cisco for that matter, Learning Academy. And that is what the country needs more of. My last point, really my last point, is that there's a growing research, and recently the World Bank published a study that was undertaken in Latin America. And what it showed is that for job creation and job seekers, shorter courses which have a bigger impact in terms of pragmatic solutions to the job deficits that exist in those Latin American countries are proven to be highly effective. So we need to relook the whole education thing. I'm not saying degree stuff is bad. I'm a fan of being educated, all of that. But we need to look at pragmatic things that can be done and stop and cut the bush colleges. We must destroy bush colleges, those that sell to our people and make them invest funding, and they end up with zero employability or ability to drive entrepreneurship. So ultimately, Africans must take part in the digital economy. That's the first thing. They must get set up to take part in the digital economy. No one is born with this digital knowledge. It's things that you learn. As you learn, you develop things. When you have a wider circle of like-minded people, you learn more about the content, and so the cycle continues. And the digital nativity of our population has to be something which is front and center. Young people, as kids are born and they get to kindergartens, etc., it must become a national thing to engage with technology and the removal of the fear thereof. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts because I know I'm out of time by sort of 2 minutes, and I sincerely thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much. My mic was off on the other side. We appreciate your time, and indeed, you have really laid the foundation for the coming panel discussions. I appreciated what you touched on using MIT as a case study about how do we build digital capacity and using them as a sort of a point of reference for us to derive our knowledge and get examples from. And I particularly appreciated the point about empowering women because we are definite hustlers. So it's lovely to hear men say that. But thank you very much for your time, and definitely, we're looking forward to working with you in the near future. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Sunil Jenis, who is the director for SAP Africa. Stay tuned. We'll be having our panel discussion up in a moment.